Hello, and welcome to Media Assault, the podcast about movies, music, and video games. Visit us online at MediaAssault.com or on Twitter at Media Assault. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Media Assault, the podcast about movies, music, and video games. My name is Sean Kazette, and I'm your host for yet another week of the show. This week is Music Week, and I've got two music-related segments for you this week. I'm recording this on April 27th, and it just so happens to be Ace Frehley's birthday. And if you know me from my YouTube channel or my website, you know that I'm a huge Kiss fan. And Ace Frehley was one of the first guitarists that made me sit up and take notice of what was possible with a guitar. I was 9 years old, sitting in my bedroom with a copy of Alive, and I heard the song Parasite. And I'll put a link to the Alive version of that song in the show notes. The guitar on that song just made my little 9-year-old brain envision lightning hitting the guitar strings. Now, I have to point out that this was really before I knew much about Kiss's visual image or Ace's characterization as the spaceman, or how integral lightning was to his character. My brain just envisioned lightning shooting out of the guitar player's fingers to make the riff that the song is based around. I'd never heard a riff like that. And up to that point, I'd been listening to Elton John and the Bay City Rollers and Sean Cassidy, so what did I know? But that riff, it changed everything. I just wanted to hear more stuff like that. So while I never really became a guitar player, even though I did take lessons for a short time and realized that I'm certainly a better drummer than I am a guitarist, Ace Frehley really influenced my love for heavy music. And there are definitely more gifted guitar players and better technical players out there, but there was just something about his playing that captured my imagination. So anyway, today is Ace Frehley's 67th birthday. And while that's hard to believe, what's even more hard to believe, I think, is how prolific he's become since becoming sober over a decade ago. For a while, there was a running joke that Ace would have an album out in the spring for what seemed like damn near 20 years. Before 2009, his last solo album was Trouble Walking, and that was released in 1989. Including 2009's Anomaly, he's released 2 full albums of original material and an album of covers in 7 years. That may not sound like much, but consider the fact that he'd only recorded and released 4 full albums and 1 live EP between 1978 and 2009, and all of those came before 1990. So today, on his 67th birthday, Ace Frehley released the first single from his as-yet untitled new album, which is slated for release later this year, I believe in the summer. And the track is called Bronx Boy. And I'll put a link to the song in the show notes, of course. And it's pretty much what you'd expect from a song from Ace Frehley. It's gritty, it's guitar-based, it's a little rough around the edges, and it's just Ace. The lyrics refer to himself as a street kid trying to exist. And he also sings about switchblades and homemade zip guns. And Ace, of course, was raised in the Bronx. And in his 2011 autobiography, No Regrets, he said that he was a member of the Ducky Boys, which are were an Irish street gang. Now, Ace has written about his street life before, specifically in a song called Hard Times from Kiss's 1979 album Dynasty. But that song was a little more remorseful about his days on the street. The lyrics were, or at least some of the lyrics were, "The hard times are dead and gone, but the hard times have made me strong, and the hard times have made me see that the hard times ain't where I want to be." But on Bronx Boy, Ace is a little more aggressive about his street experiences, and that's evident in the chorus of the song, which goes, "Bronx boy, just trying to exist. I never played with toys. Don't give me bullshit. I'm just a street kid. We seek and destroy. Never thought much of it. I'm just a Bronx boy." If anything, the song serves up a nice preview of, hopefully, what's to come on the new album. It seems a lot more raw than his previous original album, or previous album of original material, Space Invader. And that album was a little more focused than Anomaly, the one that came before it. I think on that one he tended to kind of stray from his strengths, and Space Invader was a little more focused on what makes him Ace. And I think he's always very smart to play to his strengths and just stick to what he's known for and what he's absolutely best at, which is rock and roll with his special brand of guitar playing. He's not super flashy, but he does have a signature style, and his solos, at least I think, are instantly recognizable. So Bronx Boy is a much better lead-off single than Gimme a Feeling, which was the lead-off single from Space Invader. And I really look forward to hearing more from this album, and looking forward to getting the album in the summertime. Bronx Boy is available now on all the usual digital music outlets. Speaking of Ace Frehley, the man who was responsible for signing Ace to a recording contract back in 1986, which basically brought Ace out of the shadows of Kiss and back into the spotlight, was Eddie Trunk. Now, Trunk started out as a DJ in the New York, New Jersey area as a kid, and he eventually became vice president of Megaforce Records. And Megaforce was responsible for signing acts like Metallica and Anthrax, Exciter, Raven. Trunk was a huge Kiss fan, and he managed to convince John Zazula, who was the owner of Megaforce, to take a chance on Ace Frehley as a solo act. And Ace at the time was kind of going through a rough patch. He was coming off the departure from Kiss. He had a few run-ins with the law, basically due to his addictions at the time. Now, Eddie Trunk has become sort of a spokesperson for hard rock over the last 10 years or so. He hosted the talk show That Metal Show on VH1 Classic when that network still existed, and he remains a DJ on Sirius XM, on their Volume channel and their Hair Nation channel with his show Trunk Nation. And he's known for his Stump the Trunk trivia bits that he also does at live appearances now, but he also did that on the That Metal Show, where people would ask him questions and attempt to stump him. He's very knowledgeable about hard rock and heavy metal, and he frequently can rattle off a lot of minutia about 1980s hard rock bands, about who recorded what and where, and who played on what, and all that kind of stuff. But he's also very self-centered and very self-promoting. I have a lot of respect for the hard work that he does promoting the type of music that I enjoy. And, you know, he gets news about bands out to people and so on and so forth. But I don't think I've ever heard someone so interested in making every story about every band about him in some form or fashion. As he's gotten more famous and more well-known for being this heavy metal knowledge guru, he's also become very adept at spinning stories in such a way that he becomes the focal point. Or if he's not doing that, he'll bring up his experience with working in the music industry as why he knows better than the average fan what's really happening in the music business. Now, I understand that everyone draws on personal experience to frame their stories and their perspectives. Hell, I do it. I just did it earlier today in my show with my experience first hearing Ace Frehley's guitar playing as a kid. But Eddie Trunk does it in a condescending way, almost as if the unwashed masses of idiots who like heavy rock music don't have any comprehension of how the music industry works, or how concerts are promoted, or how albums are produced. Now, granted, some people don't have the knowledge of those things, and they don't care to know anything about them. But I challenge you to listen to Eddie Trunk tell a story about the industry and not hear his condescending tone about how you may think it works this way, but it doesn't. He also seems fixated on a certain number of topics that he repeatedly comes back to time and again. Kiss. Whether it be his displeasure with the band touring with Tommy Thayer and Eric Singer in makeup, or the fact that Kiss members, specifically Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley, don't acknowledge the support that Trunk has shown the band over the years on his radio shows. He doesn't have any such beef with Peter Criss or Ace Frehley, though, because they've appeared on his show in the past. And he, of course, brings up the fact that he's good friends with Ace Frehley as often as possible. He also isn't happy that Gene and Paul never accepted invitations to appear on that metal show. In fact, Paul Stanley once called the show Wayne's World and said he didn't want to have anything to do with it. But of course, Eddie Trunk had to rattle off a list of names of the people who did once have something to do with it and appeared on the show, as, you know, being proof that he's right and that person is wrong. Also, frequently getting under the skin of Eddie Trunk are the topics of CDs being phased out as the number one way to listen to music, and people calling 1980s hard rock hair metal. That really rankles him. And I just want to say that I'm not faulting the guy for having opinions. He just never seems to get too far away from those topics specifically for too long. And please, by all means, listen to his radio shows for a week, and you're bound to hear him go on a rant about one of those topics or something similar. And for somebody who professes to be, or at least accepts the title of, a flag waver for all things hard rock and heavy metal, he seemingly has no interest in promoting new bands or bands that aren't made up of guys from old bands. For example, he took a very focused interest in the band Winery Dogs, who are a great band to be sure. But A, he claims to be responsible for their origin because he connected the members, and B, the Winery Dogs members were all in other bands that have had greater success. If it weren't for these two things, you'd probably never hear about the Winery Dogs on his show. I'm sure of it. And I will say he is a great source to hear songs, new songs, from older or established artists that you might not be aware have released new music. But from my experience, he's absolutely dreadful at supporting or promoting new artists, truly new artists. Today, for example, I happened to catch part of his show while driving home, and one of his listeners called in to suggest some new bands to his audience, and Trunk threw out a backhanded compliment that even though he was aware of these new bands, there's a big difference in quality between a good band and a great band, and that difference is songwriting. He was pontificating about how there are billions of great musicians and singers and guitar players, but there are very few great songwriters. Now, I've heard him diss a great newish band like Ghost for not blowing him away, and personally, I think they possess great songwriting, and specifically Tobias Forge, who is basically the main songwriter behind Ghost. I think he's a fantastic songwriter. And people have told him that he's wrong about Ghost because he doesn't really listen to them like he should. His words, not mine. And he laughs off that idea that he's not giving them a fair shake. But of course, he's really quick to refer to his friend Kerry King from Slayer, who agrees with his opinion. And who are you, Ghost fan, if you don't agree with Eddie Trunk and Kerry King? Well, you'd be correct in your opinion because no one can tell you what to like or not to like. even Eddie Trunk. And so you may be asking yourself, what am I trying to accomplish by bringing up Eddie Trunk on my 2 Cent podcast? Is it jealousy that someone has been able to turn their lifelong obsession with music into a way of life? No, not really. And do I think I know more than he does about music or metal? Not even close. My main problem with him is that I wish that somebody with his taste in music, who has achieved such a high level of exposure within mainstream media, would do something more positive with the opportunity. Eddie Trunk constantly seems to speak from a defensive position about his views and his taste in music. I just think that he could do more for the genre by promoting new talent more often, spend less time focused on the past and more time embracing the future, whether that be new bands or new technology or new ways of receiving music, whatever it is. Do that and spend less time telling his audience how he's right and they're wrong because he's got Mick Mars's phone number and you don't. And hey, if you don't agree with me, that's fine. Tell me why I'm wrong, and I'd be happy to have you as a guest on my show. I'm all for admitting my mistakes. Well, that's it for this week's Media Assault. Next week is Games Week, and I look forward to having you as a listener. Feel free to drop me an email at sean@media-assault.com. You can also reach me on Twitter at Media Assault. That's one word. And just so you know, Media Assault is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, and Stitcher, and is hosted on Buzzsprout. Thanks again for listening. Take it easy.